All right, so thank you for joining me today. As you can see, this is the first study abroad pre-departure orientation session. I think I should be able to keep it right to an hour, but hopefully I won't go over. We have just some kind of basic stuff that we're going to be talking about today in terms of kind of understanding how the processes work on the NDSU side, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the travel planning, the experience part of it in future sessions. In general, welcome. Thank you for coming and taking part. Um, there's just a basic overview of all of the pieces that we're going to go through today, but we'll get into more detail in each of those. And first of all, though, we're going to start with a surprise math test. So if you have a piece of paper or some sort of something you can write on, a phone, a back of an envelope, please write down numbers 1 through 7. This is going to be the opposite of most math tests, though. Rather than having to show your work, I'm going to ask you to do this math in your head. We are going to have 1 minute for you to work on this, and there is going to be a key that you're going to need that will tell you how to do these math problems. So look for the yellow box and follow the instructions. And then at the end of the 1 minute that I will be timing, I will show you the answers, and we'll talk a little bit about why on earth you're having this very important surprise math test. So we'll go ahead and get started now. Again, I kind of wish that I had some sort of hold music or soothing music here. All right, so we're about halfway through our minute. Just do your best. I would say that if you're not able to get these questions right, you're not allowed to go abroad, but that's not true. This is just a fun thing. All right, so about 10 seconds left. So finish up any that you can if you have any that are left. All right, ding ding, time is up. All right, so here are the answers. If you want to take a look and see how you did. All right, so anyone feel like jumping in and guessing as to how this is related to study abroad? Yeah, I know. It's like, why is she doing this to me? This is the very beginning of study abroad. I thought I was done with all of the paperwork, and now she's giving me a math test. She's really cruel. Um, but it really is, I think, kind of a good illustration of the way that when you go abroad, you're running into things that it's not just things that are completely new. You're running into a lot of things that look similar to things that you've experienced before. Things that seem like they might be familiar, but in this new cultural context have a very different meaning and a different set of implications. And so a lot of what you're doing when you're getting there is learning to kind of filter the things that seem familiar in new ways and to come to a deeper understanding of what those things are. And honestly, when you first get to a new location, a lot of times it can be really tiring because your brain has to take a lot of time to process and think through things in ways that are really different from what they've been before. And it's really a great opportunity to have kind of those initial implications, those initial impressions that you have when you first run into something, but also to really take time throughout when you're abroad and to just keep going back to those different things that you thought you learned about at first and look for deeper and deeper meanings. Because a lot of times the more cultural understanding you have about a place, the more you start to see the implications that are kind of hidden in those things that you thought that you understood when you first had encountered them. When you're abroad, you'll encounter a lot of different things. Of course, you'll encounter different culture and language, accents. Even if you happen to be someplace where English is the first language, you'll be surprised at the impact of having different slang or different types of phrasing that people use. You'll run into new foods. This is a great opportunity to learn things that you love and brand new recipes that you'll have a great time coming back and sharing with others as well. New daily routines. It's kind of surprising how something as simple as, maybe you normally shower during the morning and when you're abroad, you take a bath at night instead, or, a different type of commute where maybe you're walking instead of driving to class or something like that. And that can just really have a big impact on the experience of what your day is like. So I really encourage you to kind of enjoy the new rhythm of life that you'll have while you're abroad. You're of course going to run into people who dress or look differently. This is a really great opportunity to get to know new people and start to understand kind of the backgrounds and why people are the way that they are and how they view the world and some of those pieces. You're going to run into new ways of interacting with others. Some of the big things in our area, of course, we have certain expectations for how close you stand to another person or how much eye contact you give. For example, a lot of times in the US, we have kind of an expectation that making eye contact with people is a good way of indicating that you're honest and that you're being kind of forthright in what you're saying. But in some places, that's considered to be really rude because it's seen as being too kind of direct and too almost aggressive to be like that. So depending on where you're going, you're just going to find a lot of different ways of interacting and projecting who you are and kind of what you're thinking and what you want to say with your body language. Bargaining is another thing that's interesting in some places. Personally, honestly, I'm not very good at bargaining. But some people really love it and they're really great at it. So if you have a chance to try bargaining, that's a really different way of buying things and kind of getting to know the people who are selling them. And then means of transportation. Of course, you'll probably be taking a plane. You might have an opportunity to take trains or metro systems that we don't have available in the Fargo-Moorhead area. And so if you have an opportunity to do those, I really encourage it because public transportation is really great in a lot of areas of the world. And in conclusion, when you study abroad, it's a really great chance to just see all of those things that you take for granted. You've had a whole lifetime of experiences built up to now, and it's just a chance to see where you're having assumptions and kind of understandings that are built from that, and how things can be different in other places. So I really hope that you will enjoy this opportunity to go someplace and to kind of see that contrast and start to rethink things that you may have assumed in the past. So, and please tell me about it when you get back as well. All right, so jumping into more kind of the straight topic here, I'm going to talk just a little bit about travel documents first. The first key thing, if you are going someplace international, is that you generally need a passport. One thing that is really important to know at this point is that if you don't already have your passport, either actually have it or have applied for it, it's really important that you go ahead and start applying for that as soon as possible. Normally, passport processing times are something in the 3 to 6 week range, but because of COVID, there were significant delays and closures with the passport processing centers, and so they're still trying to catch up on the backlog with passports, which means that they're currently at about a 10 to 12 week processing time. It is possible to expedite a passport for an additional $60 over the normal fees, but that's still somewhere around 4 to 6 weeks for the processing for that. So definitely save yourself some money and some hassle and some stress by applying for a passport as soon as possible. When you apply for a passport, it comes out to about $135 between two fees, one that goes to the US Department of State that actually makes the passport, and part of it also goes to the passport processing center where you do the application process itself. You also need a certified birth certificate, which means it can't just be a photocopy that you would get made on like a photocopy machine. It has to actually be something official that comes from the county or from the state that you were born. You do get that back in the mail afterwards, so it's not a permanent loss or anything like that, but you do need that official copy. And when it's returned, you end up receiving two different envelopes, one with the passport in it and one with the birth certificate copy, and they usually come on slightly different days. You also need a passport photo. A passport photo is a very official format where it's a kind of a square format and your head has to be in a very specific layout for a passport photo. That's something that you can get taken at the NDSU card office in the Memorial Union, or you can get it taken some places like Walgreens, Walmart, etc. And there is a small fee for that. Usually you do receive 2 photos when you have your passport photos taken. Hold on to the second one just in case you might need it for visa processing or for any other purpose. And then you also need some sort of proof of identity, which for most people would be a driver's license, as well as a copy of that. And then there's an application that you would fill out, and that you can fill out at passports.state.gov. And I'll send out a PDF copy of all of these slides, so you can use the actual links from these as well if you need to use that to get started on this process. Once you have your passport, you may also need a visa as well. A visa is the official permission that a country would give you to enter that country for a specific purpose for a specific period of time. So for example, you may need permission to enter the country to be a student for up to 5 months. And each country has very different processes in terms of what you need to be allowed to get that permission, what documentation you need, whether you need to apply in person or whether you can do it by mail. Some countries you do it after you arrive, some you do it before. In general though, kind of to make some generalizations, visas are often some sort of stamp or sticker that ends up being placed in your passport. Most of the time, though not always, it's something that you would do before you leave the US. But if you need a residence permit for a country like Germany, for example, those are something that you usually would do after you arrive. Costa Rica is another one that does it after as well. Do you need a visa? So the way to find out the answer to that question, the ultimate kind of authority on this is going to be the embassy or the consulate from the host country that you're going to be going to. And you can just pull that up on Google and they'll have information about who needs visas and what the requirements are for applying for them. Also, your host school or your program will often help you with this and let you know kind of proactively about if you're going to need a visa. And I can also help as well if you have any questions. The US Department of State does have some information about visa requirements, but I'll say they're maybe not the best source just because they tend to focus a little bit more on tourist kind of visa information as opposed to going for a longer period of time like you would to study. If you do need to apply for a visa, some of the typical requirements, there's usually some sort of application form. You may have to pay a fee. You may, again, need a passport photo or photos. You do usually need, well, pretty much always need your passport, which is why you would want to apply for your passport as early as possible. And then you may also need some sort of letter of acceptance from your host university, whether that's a PDF copy or some countries still require a paper copy be mailed. It could be requiring some sort of proof of income or proof of funds to show that you will be able to support yourself when you're in the country. It's not as common to need a doctor's report anymore, but that is happening in some countries. You may also need, depending on kind of how things develop in the next few months, you may also need either some sort of proof of a negative COVID test or some sort of proof of immunization or something like that. And that'll be something that we'll be working with people closely to identify as that those requirements develop. And you also likely will need some sort of proof of insurance, which I'll talk about that a little bit more later here. And then just as a heads up, depending on where you're going, for some countries, they do require that people apply in person. Some of the common countries that require that include France and Spain and Italy. And some of those do require going in person to Chicago. So if you have any questions about that, please let us know. And we can definitely help. The really important things, though, that just to highlight with visas, often you do have to submit your passport. If a visa application requires your passport, they're going to hold on to it until they finish processing your passport. So you wouldn't want to plan any sort of travel that would require your passport in that interim period. It can take 1 to 3 months to get a visa. Usually you're not able to apply for visas more than 90 days in advance of when you would enter the country though. So it's not something that you can do super early, though you may be able to start preparing by gathering some of the information that you would need to apply for the visa earlier, but usually it's kind of within that time window. That said, it is usually better to apply earlier rather than later, just because if there are any delays or anything like that, that gives you the most chance of getting the visa back in time to travel like you planned. And then also, if your country does require that you have a visa, it's very critical that you do that. That is something that countries will stop you from entering the country if you do not have the appropriate visa. And actually, usually what would happen is you would arrive at the airport in the US here, ready to leave, and the airport personnel would check to make sure that you have the right documentation to enter the country. And if you don't, then they would not let you get on the plane. The reason for that being that the countries will actually fine the airlines if they let someone travel who is not authorized to enter the country. So if you have any questions, again, please contact us and we can definitely help with going through this process. And one last note, if you do for any reason have to mail your passport application, make sure to do so with a type of mail service that includes a tracking number, because of course nobody wants to have their passport go missing in transit and have to worry about where that might be, or have to get a replacement passport on short notice or something like that. But again, we're here to help. Yeah, we'll be there throughout this process. All right, so health insurance. Um, Before I get into too much with health insurance, I do have to tell a short and very sad story from when I was a student. I studied abroad in Japan myself, and there was another student from a different school who had gone to the school that I studied at as well. I'll be honest, personally, I didn't really care about health insurance. It wasn't important to me. I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. My parents had contacted our US health insurance company and had double checked that the coverage from our US company was going to cover me abroad. And it was just emergency coverage. But that was really all the thought that I had given to it. This friend that I had, her name was Meredith. She was in a similar boat where her family had double checked. They had insurance through their home insurance provider here in the US. And that was really all that she thought that she needed. Unfortunately, a couple of weeks into the time that we were in Japan, she was biking with a couple of friends, and her bike ran into the curb. So it just kind of bounced off the curb. She wasn't going very fast or anything like that, but unfortunately she hit it at just the right angle that she fell over sideways and landed on her arm. And unfortunately she broke her arm, and not just a little bit. She really, really broke her arm into quite a few pieces. And so she ended up having to have surgery to have pins put in place and to get that all kind of put together. And the health system in Japan is very different from the health system here in the US. In the US, generally, after you have a broken arm or something like that, we usually try to send people home as quickly as possible on the idea that you would rest better when you're at home. But in the Japanese healthcare system, they think that that's not really good kind of service. It doesn't watch out to make sure that people are taken care of as well as they would like. So she ended up being in the hospital for about 2 weeks after that before she finally convinced the Japanese doctors that she should be able to come back to the dorm and heal up there. And then shortly thereafter, she had to go back and have them take a look at her arm and check to see if everything was healing okay. And unfortunately, they found that it was not. And so she ended up coming back to the US where they had to re-break her arm and then reset it and a few things. And the good news on that front is that everything ended up being okay. She was fine, her arm healed just fine. The sad news, however, was that when her American health insurance company received the bill for all of these services in Japan, they said that because when she had been taken to the emergency room, she was checked into the hospital, it was no longer considered an emergency, and they would not cover any of the costs of the healthcare that she had received there. So that left her with a very expensive bill that she really didn't have any way of covering. And unfortunately, she just ended up not being able to return to Japan and had to have all of her things mailed back to the US. And that was the very sad end of her semester. So, why do I tell this very sad story? The reason is just to illustrate that there are a lot of American health insurance companies that do technically have some sort of coverage for when people are traveling. However, American health insurance companies are often really focused on trying to keep their costs down, and they're not really set up to help if you have any sort of incidents that are happening abroad. So that's why it's really important when you're traveling to make sure that you have international travel insurance that is specifically set up for covering you should anything happen when you're in another country. Generally, this type of health insurance is designed to have coverage for you that doesn't have a deductible per injury or illness. It usually has some sort of high dollar amount total that it would cover that should cover pretty much anything that might happen to you. Often this type of health insurance also includes emergency medical evacuation, meaning that if you needed to return to the US to have any additional services that it would cover putting you on the plane to come back. And a lot of this insurance also includes, if you happen to be sick in another country, flying someone to be with you at your bedside in the hospital abroad so that you're not alone when that happens. And we actually had a student a couple of years ago who had broken her arm in Greece, which was not the country where she was studying. She was studying in the UK, but she had gone on a break to Greece, and the health insurance flew her mom to be with her in Greece, actually covered and arranged for getting her switched to a different hospital that they thought had a better standard of care for her. And then once she had surgery on her ankle, they actually flew both her and her mom back to the UK so that her mom could help her get settled into her housing back in the UK so she could finish out her semester, which was really, really helpful and made a big difference for her being able to complete things. It also includes worldwide emergency assistance, so if you have any questions or any kind of major emergencies, and coverage for things like natural disasters or terrorist attacks. An example of a natural disaster, maybe about 10 years ago in Japan, there was a big earthquake, and there was the Fukushima disaster where there were some issues with the nuclear facilities where students were assisted with returning to the US while there was some uncertainty about the safety of the situation. And then ultimately, the school where I was working at the time, the students were able to return later, but they were very thankful to have that coverage to make sure that they just weren't staying in a situation where kind of the safety prognosis was unknown at that point. So if you are going on a program that does not have health insurance already included, the affiliate providers generally do have it included. If you're going on usually an NDSU partner exchange program or a direct program that doesn't have it included, NDSU does have an agreement with an organization called CISI for insurance. Purchasing that is required by May 1st. And the cost is really affordable. It's $39.25 per month. And when you order it, you just go on and you indicate the start date that you'd like for the coverage and the number of months of coverage that you would like extending from that start date. If you are going on an ISEP program, you would do insurance through them. If you are going on an affiliate provider program that has health insurance included, you don't need to also purchase the CISI because the insurance that you would receive through your affiliate provider is going to be very, very similar in the coverage. But if you are uncertain as to whether you need any additional coverage, please again contact us and we can verify one way or the other. But yeah, it's really important. It's really helpful, and it's one of those things we hope that you never need to use, but we want to make sure that you have that coverage just in case it might come up.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
So if the health insurance isn't included in the program, is CISI available for any program that we wanted to if it's not ISA?
Yeah, I do know your program specifically, it is included, so you
Oh,
don't have
okay.
to worry about it.
Okay.
If there were a circumstance though, like you decided to travel for a long time after your program, and so you no longer had coverage through your particular program to cover the extra days or something like that, you can definitely do the CISI coverage as well. You can just contact us and we'll send you the link for purchasing it. And for short-term travel like that, it is possible to purchase it on a daily basis as well. But once we get to a month's worth of coverage, then you have to purchase it on a monthly basis as opposed to 1 month and 5 days kind of thing.
Okay, cool. That sounds good.
Yeah, excellent. Yay, thanks
Cool.
for the question.
Thanks.
All right, so jumping into academics, I just want to talk about a few different things related to kind of planning for the academics and what you can use classes for and registration and things like that. So the first thing is that we do have students register for something called University 492, which is just a placeholder. When students go abroad for a semester, it's generally 12 credits, which is the minimum that you need in order to be full-time and to be eligible for financial aid and things like that. During the summer, we have students register for the actual number of credits that you will be taking. Most of the time that tends to be between 1 and 6 credits. If you are going for a longer period of time, though, you can register for more credits during the summer. You just want to have it be pretty close to the amount of credits that you'll actually complete when you're abroad on your program. The only real exception to this is that if you are going abroad on a semester program and you are receiving a North Dakota State scholarship that requires that you register for 15 credits, you can register for 15 credits. Just in order to continue to be eligible for that. The key thing then is that you would need to also register while you're abroad for approximately the same 15 credits in order to show that you have that 15 credit completion as well. If you register for 12 credits of University 492, that does not limit you from taking more credits than that. It just makes it easier to complete the satisfactory academic progress requirements that the financial aid regulations require. So we're just trying to make it as easy as possible for you to be eligible for financial aid and to show that you're completing things that you register for. I will be issuing permits so that you'll be able to register next week. And I'll send that as an email and give you instructions on how to register when I send those emails out. When you register abroad as well, you will have some flexibility in the number of credits that you can take. Generally, from the NDSU side, we are perfectly fine with you taking anywhere from 12 to 20 credits during a normal semester. I would recommend though, maybe sticking closer to the 12 credit mark, just because you're in a different system, you're kind of getting used to a different place to be, and it's kind of nice to get out of the library. But if you do need to take more than 12 credits, you are eligible for that. While you're abroad, the program itself may have some specifics in terms of the maximum or minimum number of credits that you would take. In some countries, they require that you take a certain amount of credits in order to be eligible to be in the country for purposes of being a student, or they may have a limit on the amount that you can register for in any given semester. So be sure to listen to your program if you have any questions about that. And then again, the satisfactory academic progress requirements are something that require that you complete roughly the same amount of credits that you originally registered for. So in this case, we're comparing the University 492 with the credits that you complete abroad. And that you complete those at a 2.0 GPA or higher. So, roughly a C average or higher on those. When you're abroad, you're going to have kind of the joy of experiencing a different educational system. The registration process does vary a lot from university to university, so follow your program's instructions. They may have you register online before you arrive, or they may have you complete your registration when you're actually on site during orientation. Sometimes they'll do the on-site registration partially so that you can have some advising when you arrive, and partially just to make sure that you'll actually come. So just follow those processes as you get the instructions. You may find that the educational system credit numbering is very different from here as well. The European Credit Transfer System, ECTS, is really common. That is a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning that if you take something that's 10 ECTS, that would come back as 5 NDSU credits. And that does mean that if you were to take something that is 5 ECTS, that comes back as 2.5 NDSU credits. So they do decimal points on those. Often Australian classes are the equivalent of 4 NDSU credits. If you are in a system where you don't know, kind of what the ratio is, you can also figure it out by taking the hours of class that you would actually be in. So multiplying out the number of hours of class per week and the number of weeks that you would be in class. And then you divide that by 12.5, and that's equal to 1 credit here at NDSU. If you have any more questions, there's information on our academics page, or I can help as well with that. If you do have any kind of substitutions that you'd like to do to have a class that you take abroad come back and replace a class here, there is a request to waive or substitute courses form. That form is not required, but I do recommend it if there are things that you can potentially have be useful for you. To do that form, you would start with contacting your department, so often with your academic advisor. It is something, they actually just switched to doing an entirely electronic version of it. You can still do it before, during, or after. What happens is it ends up routing over to registration records, and they'll just hold it attached to your account until they receive the transcript after the program showing that you actually completed that course. The department has a lot of flexibility for the major or minor to decide that they're going to approve substitutions. They can substitute anything in for a requirement that's for the major or minor. So if, for example, you're an engineering student and your particular program requires that you complete some math credits, the engineering department that you're a part of can make the decision about substituting math courses for that. You do not have to go to the math department. But it is only for major or minor requirements. This is not the same process for general education requirements. If you do have any courses that you are thinking that you might want to do, or want to give yourself some options, you can also have more courses approved than you actually are going to complete. Again, registration records will double check that you actually completed the courses before they mark anything as being completed. They'll also double check, make sure that you meet any requirements related to the grade level that you need to receive, those sorts of requirements before they actually transfer it in. So the departments do have a fair amount of kind of room to approve things pending those types of requirements and those types of completion expectations. And then if you do have any courses that you just want to take because you want to take them, you don't have to do any special form to get that approved. Free electives will just come back when we receive the transcript, and we'll just automatically transfer in and count towards the total number of credits that you need in order to graduate. For general education credits, on the other hand, that is a separate process that goes through the Faculty Senate Curriculum Committee. If you have not completed cultural diversity and or global perspectives, those are extremely easy to complete. Those are something that just the act of studying abroad can fulfill those. You do have to complete the appeal general education requirements form still for those, but you can do that simply by checking a box on there saying that you studied abroad, and then once you have completed your study abroad experience, then the committee can approve that. If you do have any other requirements, humanities or something like that, that you would like to get approved, there is an appeal process for that, which you would do after you have completed your study abroad experience. And with that, you do have to make the argument about how the particular course that you took abroad fulfilled the general education learning outcomes that are set by NDSU. And it's something that you can do pretty much any time before you graduate, but there are some deadlines for it each semester, November 15th and April 15th, to hear an answer on whether that substitution has been approved during that particular semester. If you have any questions, or if you'd like assistance, or if you would just like somebody to read an appeal that you have put together before you submit it, please feel free to contact us, and we are here to help with that. Again, registering is also going to be something that you'll run into in terms of returning to NDSU potentially. So if you are going to be abroad during a registration window for the following semester, you will just register as normal through Campus Connection. That is something where you may want to try logging into Campus Connection a week or so before your registration window, just to make sure you aren't having any issues with your password or getting into Campus Connection in any fashion. If you do have any issues with getting in, the NDUS Help Desk can assist with getting a password reset or something like that done. And then also, just as a heads up, make sure to think about your registration date and time in terms of the time difference, because it is very possible that if you're in a very different part of the world, that you may end up having a registration window that happens to fall in the middle of the night, or requires getting up very early, or going to bed a bit later in order to get in right when you have your opening to register. And then one other thing, before you return, of course, you'll want to make sure to follow any requirements on site that might be there for making sure that your transcript comes back to NDSU. I do have the addresses here for where that is sent to, depending on whether it is sent as regular mail or sent as express mail, like FedEx or DHL or something like that. However, don't bother to write this down. You will not have that piece of paper. Just know that on the Study Abroad website, on the Returning to NDSU page, there are those addresses. So you can go look those up very easily when you're going to return, and make sure that you have that correct information if you do need it, or feel free to email us, and we can definitely send it to you as well. And then as far as the timeline goes, what happens is it usually takes about 1 to 2 months for the transcript to arrive after your semester is over. We usually process within a day or two, I'll say under a week for sure, and then send that with a cover sheet over to Registration Records. When we have completed processing, you will receive 2 emails, one that'll say the item transcript from abroad has been marked complete, and one that says a document has been attached to your account, which means that you can log into your NDSU Study Abroad application and see a copy of what that transcript is as it's going over to Registration Records, and you can make sure that everything looks like what you would expect. If you do see anything that seems a little bit off, or there's a class missing or something like that, you can contact us as well, and we can work with the school to see about getting a corrected transcript. But that's pretty rare. But if that happens to happen to you, please contact us and we can definitely work on it. And then Registration Records generally takes about 1 to 2 months to process on their side before everything shows as updated. So just as a heads up, if you are planning on graduating right after the program, the processing times may delay your graduation and push the graduation date off to the following term. That information is in the application, so hopefully you already know about that, but just in case you didn't, please be aware of that. And then here is an example of what the NDSU transcript will look like. I'm just going to make this a little bigger here. So the section on the side that's actually for the term, what's going to happen there is that is actually just going to switch over and say University 492, Study Abroad, and it's going to say the number of credits that you actually completed, but it's not going to list the individual classes. And then it will give you a P for pass as long as you pass at least one class. So please pass at least one class. Unfortunately, if you did fail everything, we would have to give you an F for all 12 credits of University 492. So definitely pass something. And then up in the transfer credit section, that's where you will see the actual credits themselves transferring in, and it'll just say credits that transferred from that university. And again, it will not break out the individual classes, but there will be a record on the back end in kind of the computer system here that will list the individual classes, so you can work with your department if you still need to do approvals and things like that. Right. So a couple of just quick questions that come up for people. One, can my study abroad credits count as upper division? Yes, if the credits are upper division at that university, we may need documentation to show if their numbering system is dramatically different from here. But if it is pretty clear, oftentimes that'll just get transferred in automatically. Does study abroad affect my GPA? Generally, no. Study abroad credits are considered transfer credits and do not affect your cumulative GPA. So it just kind of zeroes out, and whatever your GPA is before ends up being your GPA after your study abroad. Do I need to earn certain grades abroad? Generally, I would say no, because again, they come in as transfer credits. However, some departments do have specific grade requirements, which apply for all graduation requirements. So if there are specific grade requirements, definitely talk to your department and make sure that you understand any implication for grades that you may receive when you're abroad. All right, so financial planning. There's a few different kind of pieces that go into the financial planning piece. I'm going to go through a couple of different slides here that are all laid out in exactly the same way. On the top are the costs that apply for types of exchange programs, so partner exchange and ISEP exchange. On the bottom in the red, if you're going on an ISEP or an NDSU direct program, you can look in that box. And if you're going on an orange affiliate or non-NDSU program, you can look in that box and they'll be in the same exact spot, slide to slide. So on this first one, we have early cost due to NDSU. That $150 administrative fee is something that pretty much everyone has paid at this point. And you may have health insurance requirement costs depending on whether it's included in your program or whether you're purchasing insurance through NDSU. Second, charges to your NDSU account for your term abroad. Exchange programs, specifically the regular NDSU tuition and student fees go through NDSU. For the ISEP and NDSU direct programs and then the affiliate provider programs, you will not be charged NDSU tuition, but you will have a small amount of student fees. So generally it's around $67 for a full load of credits. All of the programs will also have the NDSU study abroad user fee, which goes to support staff in our office. For students that are going on programs that are longer than 90 days, the user fee is $500. And for programs that are less than 90 days, the cost for that is $300. One kind of exception to that is if you do happen to be going on a program during the summer that is more than 90 days, you're still only going to be charged the $300 just because it's a little unusual, and honestly we're not going to go through the rigmarole of getting it updated to charge you more money. So yay, $300 instead of $5 for those summer students. And then charges paid separately. So these are things that you can use financial aid, loans, scholarships, etc. to cover, but they're not things that are paid through NDSU. So some of the costs for room and board often are paid separately. Of course, things like spending money, if you need a passport, a visa, flight, immunizations, books, and supplies, those are commonly things that are paid separately. What happens is that your financial aid will go into your account at NDSU at the time it normally does, pay on anything that is due to NDSU, and then you'll get a refund for anything over that that you can then use to pay for all of these additional costs. In terms of planning for financing study abroad, the most common thing for people often is private student loans. Those are non-federal loans where you do some sort of separate online application. The thing I know can be a little bit challenging for some people is that oftentimes a cosigner with good credit is required. This person does not have to be a parent, though. It can be anyone who has good credit and who's willing to cosign. So it might be another family member or a family friend or something like that. And the financial aid office can help with giving you a list of potential loan providers if you need assistance with that. Also, federal financial aid can be used for study abroad. That's something where you would need to complete the FAFSA, which you can do anytime. And then all students are eligible to take out some sort of unsubsidized direct loan through federal aid. It's just depending on kind of your financial situation, and it does impact the amount that you're eligible to take out.
Awesome.
Um,
About that.
And then scholarships are also something that you can use. Unfortunately, most of the scholarships have passed, scholarship deadlines have passed for our office. I think that we may have notified people for scholarships who will be receiving them, but normally we give notifications by the end of March. So if you haven't heard anything one way or the other, it's possible that we're still in process of notifications. Um, you can also use other scholarships that you might be eligible to receive that are related to your major or your background or an organization you're a part of or something like that. So you can take a look and see if there are any other scholarships that you can still apply for that are out there as well for that. Just of course, be sure to follow any requirements that you have in terms of if you need to register for a certain number of credits or something like that in order to maintain that eligibility. And then of course, savings, earnings, family assistance. It's pretty common for people to have some sort of assistance from their family with covering some of the costs. And generally, the financial aid office encourages people to use the savings, earnings, and family assistance where possible, rather than taking out more than you have to in a private loan. You can also look at things like income tax refunds, or if you need to kind of figure out covering costs that you might have that are earlier than others, past financial aid refunds. So maybe there's some extra aid that you haven't taken out from this term, or potentially would be eligible to take out during the summer when you're going to study abroad during the fall or something like that. And the financial aid office can help you with planning that sort of thing. And then things to kind of think about. First, early costs. So if you have any costs that are going to be coming up that would happen before your financial aid comes in, there are some programs also, for example, that may require early payments for housing or something like that. Some of those things, like the housing, we can potentially figure out paying on your behalf and then billing you through NDSU. Some of those other things, though, like airfare, passport, visa, immunizations, those are generally things that you are paying for out of pocket. But again, you can talk with a financial aid office to see if there are any options in terms of taking out additional aid for a previous term in order to have that have the kind of liquid assets to be able to use to pay for those sooner rather than later. And then some programs, especially through affiliate providers like API, AIFS, etc., have something called a verification of award form that's out there, where if you are going to be using financial aid to cover a cost, they will actually move the deadline to pay for the vast majority of the cost of the program to match when the financial aid at NDSU comes in, so that they're not asking you to pay for those things out of pocket before you would be receiving that. And that's usually something that will come up automatically in their process. But if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us or contact your program provider, and they can assist with that. And then there are a few links and some more information about loans. And just in general, again, the financial aid office and we recommend borrowing only what you need for your program, rather than taking out a bunch of extra if you don't think that you'll need it. And then just as a heads up, if you're going abroad in the fall, financial aid is generally dispersed in early September. If you're going abroad during the summer, it's usually right around the beginning of June. That you probably would want to make sure to have a direct deposit form on file if you haven't done that before. That is something that you can do in Campus Connection, or you can do kind of working with One Stop if you need assistance with that. And then that just automatically makes it so that when your financial aid comes into your account at NDSU, the refund just shows up right away in your bank account within usually 1 to 3 days after all of that has moved around. Otherwise, if they do have to issue a paper check, that's something that takes quite a while. That can actually end up taking a month or more for the paper check to be issued, sent to your house, deposited into your account, and things like that. So definitely make sure you have a direct deposit form on file if you are expecting to receive a refund. Also note, if you do have a parent who might be wanting to call, make sure that you have a FERPA release form on file so that they are able to receive information about your account. If you do have any housing, meal plans, parking pass, or anything like that that you won't be using, you can cancel those and receive a refund for them. So save a little bit of money here and there on that. And then also, if you do a private loan be sure to do all of the follow-up paperwork. It's really easy to miss something that you might need to sign or follow up on. So just be really diligent about it, and the financial aid office can help make sure that you're keeping on track of those things as well. And then if you do want further assistance than what we've already received with financial aid, we do have to make sure that you have a budget, so the financial aid office has the right numbers to work with. We do have that worked into the process now, though, so I think most people have budgets if they are needing them. If you don't, though, please feel free to contact us in the Study Abroad office, and we'll make sure to get a budget set up for you. And then once we set up the budget, we do send you an email that has the link for the online appointment system for the financial aid office. But if you have any questions, if you are not sure about where you are in this process, again, please contact us and we will help. All right, we made it. So exciting. That said, I am going to give you a small piece of homework. It's optional and fun homework, though, so nothing stressful. The homework is simply write a letter to yourself. Think about things that you might be excited about, what your personal goals are, if you have any worries, if you have things that you want to look back on in the future and kind of think back to. This is something that's only for you. Nobody in our office is going to read it. We just have you put it in a sealed envelope, and then when you return, we will get it back to you, either mail it to you or have you pick it up, so that you can read kind of what you were thinking about before you studied abroad. So feel free to drop it off at the Study Abroad Services office, which is located in the Memorial Union, and we will hold on to it and get it back to you at the end. And then lastly, we will be having another pre-departure session a week from today, Tuesday, March 30th. I do want to point out that I did end up having to move it. I had something that I had to reschedule for that one day, so I moved that up by one day. I've also added another optional session that'll be happening on Tuesday, April 13th. We are not holding the class this semester just because of kind of the uncertainties around COVID. But there was some interest in the information in the class. So this optional session, we're going to talk about some things like journaling, personal identity, which is kind of my area that I'm really interested in, cultural context, and the way that how we understand ourselves and our stories and things like that are kind of tied to the cultural context that we're in. And we're also going to talk a little bit about professional development and ways that you might think about looking for professional development opportunities while we're abroad. And then the last session, the one where I will be inviting returnees, is going to be on Wednesday, April 21st. And so that's a different day, Wednesday instead of Tuesday, and that'll be at 3 o'clock. All right. Well, thank you all for joining me.